Good day, fellow champions of inclusion. I'm Aaron, and this is the Inclusive Dad Podcast, where we explore inclusion and make it practical. Before we dive in, don't forget to subscribe, rate, or review the show on your favorite platform. We truly appreciate your feedback and would be honored if you shared the podcast with friends and family who might benefit. If you want to support us in our mission, please click on the link in the show description. Today, my guest is Michaela Cox. Welcome to the show.
It's good to be here. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Why don't you start us off with telling me a little bit about yourself?
I am, as you said, Michaela S. Cox. I have been an author for a while now. I think I'm up to, 14, 15 books. I'm always working on something. Trying to finish up a draft right now. I carry 6 different series right now in the nonfiction world. I'll probably be adding to it. But my story is that I have traveled a journey of learning how to navigate the knocks at my door in my life, what I call my 38 triple D, not what you think. Except maybe when I was pregnant a long time ago. I don't know. But, the body does strange things when you're pregnant. But it has more to do with, in reality, of the journey of learning from a very early age, from the second I was born, literally my whole entire life, what it's like to live a life of disability, legal blindness in my case. We can get into all the ins and outs of that. And then fast forward to I was 26. Of course, I did what a lot of people do. You get out of high school, hopefully alive, and not too scarred from it. And you go on to college, and then you meet someone, and then you think, oh, this sounds like a good idea. Let's get married. And in my case, my first one did not work out. So in 2005, at 26, I found myself divorced, the second D. I was lucky and blessed to find the next guy that would be in my life shortly after that, who I was with for almost 12 years until we unexpectedly lost him in 2017, which is the third D. And I was 38 at the time, of death of beloved husband, which threw me into military widowhood and solo parenting.
Mm-hmm. That's a lot.
And through all of that, I have learned to go from not just surviving in life, but thriving, or at least striving to thrive. And it is a lot. And the expression that we say, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Well, there's an author version of that supports why I could very easily have 15 plus books. What doesn't kill you makes you and gives you a lot to write about. So there you go.
Yeah, that's great. So you said you're legally blind. Can you see at all, or?
Yeah, I can.
Okay.
I'm not sure of your background or your audience background, but I was brought up and for my own personal beliefs, was raised in a Christian household, and I'm a Christian, but we believe that I was born totally blind. Now, keep in mind, I'm fixing to show my age. Even though I live in Louisiana, I was originally born in Houston, Texas in 1978. Okay. While we don't have all the information in the medicine field in all aspects, we dang sure didn't have it in the late 70s. So I was born totally blind. There is no visual issues in my family's history, genetics. My kids don't have it, thank God. Except for with, everyone as they get older have to start wearing readers or bifocals. So my current, actual visual situation is not genetic. And so there was no family history. It's obviously not genetic. So they were like, what the heck? Where did this come from? So they couldn't explain why I was born that way any more than they could at 7 months old. So June of 79, why I was all of a sudden seeing when, according to the medical field, I was not supposed to be seeing. But then again, I wasn't supposed to be born that way either. So, there you go. So I believe that I was granted my sight at 7 months old through a miracle. And even though I was granted my sight, it is still impaired. The ins and outs of it, I don't know about all disabilities. I can only speak to mine. But the funny thing about visual disabilities, you could have vision is, to me, so complex because you have all sorts of arrays of different type of visual disabilities. And then even if you had 50 people in the same room with the exact same medical diagnosis, if it so much just affects them differently by one little smidge, one way or the other, the impact and the fallout that they experience can be totally different from mine. It's so odd and random. It's really weird and fascinating, but weird. What mine boils down to, and people will say, well, what can you see? I'm like, it's not that simple. I have a 6-faceted cocktail of what looks to be abnormal vision, and I don't mean normal like what's normal. I mean define normal, but I mean anatomically, biologically, physically, when you go in the medical field, what they would put in normal parameters of what your body is when working properly, healthy, supposed to be doing is what I mean in this circumstance. Is mine is called optic nerve atrophy, which optrophy, whatever. I'm very layman's terms. I'm not a doctor. Okay, so if there's any medical professions this in your audience listening that are in that field, please don't go, oh my gosh, this woman does not know what clue she's talking about. I did say I'm explaining it in layman's terms the way it's always been explained to me. So I will probably medically botch this up, but there you go. Full disclosure, full disclaimer. What that means is the optic nerve. If you've ever been in an eye doctor's office or in a biology textbook and you see what the optic nerve is supposed to look like in a graph, it's supposed to be a certain shape and a certain color, which is usually purple for most people. Mine is I can't remember if it's supposed to be what the shape is, but mine's the opposite, which means it doesn't work. So if it's supposed to be round, mine's not round. If it's supposed to be cylinder, mine is the opposite of whatever shape the actual optic nerve is supposed to be. And mine is not purple. As a matter of fact, I remember my mom telling me the story that when I was born in Houston and they started taking me to specialists, they actually thought I didn't have an optic nerve because my optic nerves are so pale, it was almost undetectable to a doctor. So therefore, wrong shape, wrong color, that means basically the bloodstream doesn't go through the optic nerve like it's supposed to. So therefore, it can't send the signal to the brain to tell the eye what to see. So basically, that's what it is medically, along with nystagmatism, astigmatism, crappy peripheral, crappy depth perception, and nearsightedness. So there you go. But in reality, despite all of those medical terminology and conditions, it basically boils down to, well, an obvious is I don't drive because legal blindness and driving should never go together. Public community service accomplished. You're all welcome. The roads are safe, at least for me. I can't speak for everybody else, but and it takes me a really long time to do things because, like I said, the bloodstream can't go through to send the messages at the correct pace or speed or whatever it's supposed to do and the way it's supposed to do it. So I've never had a second where I didn't see the world through my screwed up eyes. So I have no clue what normal eyesight is like, and I never will. So I've always, depending on what year you're talking about, depending on what school year you're talking about, what phase we were at, I had different things. I've always had accommodations all the way from kindergarten through grad school.
Sure.
I mean, ask me whatever you want, but that's what it boils down to. So.
Sure. Sam, I have a 22-year-old daughter. She has cerebral palsy and epilepsy, but she also had cataracts in both eyes. So she had her lenses removed pretty young, and then at least one unsuccessful surgery to try to put replacement lenses in. So she actually does not have lenses in either eye because it didn't work. So she has glasses for that part of it, but she's legally blind also. On paper, she can see. That's why I asked you, because she's also legally blind, but she can see. Because when you hear that, it's like some people think you can't see anything. So
and most people don't even realize when we say legally blind. I don't know if you've ever explained this in your audience. From my understanding, when you hear terms, your audience meaning, because obviously you know what it means. The term legal blindness, that means blindness as defined within the parameters of what the law specifies or quantifies or whatever dictates, defines as what they see as blindness within the parameters, legally speaking. And as far as I know, stateside, I don't know if I've only dealt with it in the United States term. So I don't know if that's a universal term and definition that translate internationally, or if that's just our definition. I have no way of knowing. It may be the same internationally or it may not. I don't know. But stateside, as far as I know, that is vision that is either 2200 or 2400 uncorrected, meaning correction will not fix your visual issues. And therefore, you are seen under the eyes, ironic, eyes of the law. I didn't think about that. I said that out loud. That's kind of ironic. Within the parameters of the law to be defined as legally blind. So that is what it means, legally defined as what legal blindness is.
There you go.
Who's wondering, like, what the heck are these two people talking about?
There you
That's
go.
what we're talking about.
So what is your definition of inclusion?
Well, I think that's a tricky subject because there's all sorts of facets to disability in America, and there's all sorts of different policies. I mean, we could look at transportation issues, we could look at accessibility in public buildings, we could look at education, we could look at employment, we could look at the socialization, um, job wise. And I don't want to necessarily get into the politics of it, but I have to make, and I'm not saying that everyone is not entitled to the rights that they have achieved over the last 50, 60, 70 years in our country. I am all for people having rights. Okay. So that's not what this comment's about. But what I find interesting in this country is, as they should have, the civil rights movement, the women's rights movement, even gay rights, if that's your thing, whatever right type of right movement as far as civil rights and liberties we're talking about here, I find it interesting that it wasn't until 1990 that for the rights of disabled that we finally got something on the books with the ADA. And quite honestly, that was what, 34 years ago. And so I would have been, depending on what point in that year, I would have been 11 going on 12. So for almost a fourth of my life, or almost a third of my life, we didn't really have anything to specify anything.
Right.
And I would arguably say that even now, that since it's been almost 35 years, that is arguably out of date and not sufficient and has massive loopholes in it. And no one talks about that. No one wants to talk about that. The only national campaign in my lifetime, I've been keeping up with politics. I started paying attention in 88 when I was 10, a little more in 92, and I was definitely all in at 96 when I was 18 and could have voted that election, but couldn't. I missed it by 3 weeks. I was ticked. Anyway, that's a whole nother story. But to my knowledge and experience with elections, and yes, we just had one, so it's kind of still current and everyone's still kind of paying attention to it stateside. It took until 2008, so almost 20 years, almost 2 decades after the ADA was put into social policy and legislation and on the national books per se. And then 30 years into my lifetime, with Sarah Palin mentioning it on, like or don't like her, that's not the point, but she is the only politician that I've heard from a national campaign platform standpoint even so much as mention the issue of the disabled in this country, never mind what we needed to do about it regarding our rights and what we needed.
Right.
And that's next election would have been 2 decades since that even was talked about.
Yeah.
What the heck, people?
So I was born in 1977, so I'm a little bit older than you, but yeah, the ADA was like 1990, so it is crazy that it's been, like you said, a long time, but I agree there's lots of things that still need to be fixed and changed. We like going for walks, and even in the little path to go around the lake near our house, there's at least 1 or 2 corners that don't have curb cuts still. There's no handicap parking spots in the parking lot we walk through. So yeah, there's still a lot of things that need to be, changed or fixed for sure,
So I
even this
started
far
all of
after.
that to answer your question about inclusion. So
Yep.
inclusion means, in my perspective, included in things. So are we talking about being included in the job market and given equal opportunity for employment and gainful employment? Are we talking about in the education field? Which to me, okay, so like I said, I was originally born in Texas. I didn't move to Louisiana until 88 when I was almost 10.
True.
At that time, the deal was in education was all exclusion. And I think that's part of the problem, not just with disability issues in this country. We have a bad pattern of we are extremists in the sense that we're either way over here or we're way at the other end of it. And we do this pendulum swing. And neither one of them really solves the problem, because in a lot of issues, especially when it comes to disabled, I mean, I can't speak to all the disabilities, but especially within vision, one problem, one solution does not fix all things because they're unique and individual. And like I said, with vision, you can have the exact same condition, and if one thing's off, you have a totally different set of problems that affect someone totally differently.
Right.
And, you can't just assume and presume that, well, it needs to be all or nothing. It doesn't work that way. We're all individuals, and we all have, especially with disabilities, have individual issues. You can't just rubber stamp and say, well, this is what we're doing for everybody. It doesn't work that way. And then they overcorrect, and that's just as equally bad. And I'm like, this isn't working for anybody. And so I've never thought that was a good approach in our country, no matter what issue we're talking about, but it dang sure doesn't work in the disability realm either. I know my mother told me, okay, so I was born in 78. I was a late birthday because I'm November, Scorpio. Huh. Figure out that combination. Southern Texas girl, redhead, Scorpio. There you go. I will reputation. It precedes me. Anyway, but so I started kindergarten when I was 6 and first grade when I was 7 or whatever, or fixing to be 7. My mom told me she had to fight like heck to keep me from being excluded from a normal classroom when I know there are other people that have other issues with cognitive and developmentally speaking, but I wasn't one of them. The only problem is I can't see. There's nothing wrong with my intellect to keep me from being in normal settings. But she had a fight on her hands because that, like I said, in the 80s, it was the pendulum swing was in the direction of all exclusion, which would have put me in a major disservice. And you can't just rubber stamp it and say, okay, so this is what we're doing for everybody. I mean, what is needed for dyslexia and deaf and blindness, color blindness, someone like in your daughter's case, other developmental, physical disabilities, learning disabilities, they're all so crazy different that you just can't, it doesn't work. It does not work and it creates a mess. So, and I think that is a big part of the puzzle is that our approach is all wrong. And trying to make it a blanket pattern, Band-Aid, quick fix, patch quilt scenario, you're leaving a lot of people behind because you're not doing anything that really truly caters to the individual and their individual needs with their particular circumstances related to their disability.
Yeah. That's a great point. It isn't one size fits all, one program fits all. It's definitely should be individualized for sure.
Yeah, I've always said it should be case by case basis.
Yeah.
It's the only way you can make it.
Yeah. My daughter, because of what her needs were, she was sent to like a segregated classroom, and we didn't know about inclusion until later on. And once we found out about inclusion, tried to get her back in the gen ed classes, and it was a struggle.
Yeah, it's too late. Yeah. I will say one of the biggest pieces that are useful to, well, there's more than one, as far as if we want to improve upon any of these things that we're discussing, whether it be education, whether it be, the accessibility in life, in culture and society, like the things you were mentioning in your neighborhood where you live, the job market, whatever, and the fight for disability at that, which that depends on if you're talking about SSI or SSDI, which is a whole nother other thing anyway. Don't even get me started on that one. And I tend to not be filtered. I don't do diplomacy well, and I have a totally different, not politically correct answer to that quandary. But anyway, it's just, it creates a mess, and that's what we have to work on, all of those things in order to get better inclusion, which makes it tricky because it is so particular and specificity to each one's person. You can't just say, okay, we're going to include everyone and this is how we're going to do it. So there's all these ins and outs equally to the problem and idiosyncrasies and multifaceted, but two things and several things that we can do to work towards that end game goal, no matter how complex it may seem, is that, for one, knowledge is power and we all need to be informed and raise awareness and information on whatever your area is, whether someone is struggling with their deafness or their blindness or other things, dyslexia, knowing the resources that are out there. And then in gaining your knowledge to equip yourself, you have to be a self-advocate for yourself. Or if you're the guardian or parent or someone in a person's life that is struggling with it, then you have to help either be their advocate or help them learn to advocate for themselves, or do both together. And in doing those things, you're equipping yourself, and you have to be equipped in order to be able to fight these battles.
Yeah, for sure. Let's switch gears a little bit. Why do you write?
Well, no one ever really told me to write. Like, no one said, I think you should try this because of blah, 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 whatever. I wrote from a very young age. I was a little bit of a weird kid, if you haven't figured that out by now. Like I said, I was originally born in Texas, and, it was the 80s. So I must have been a Supreme Court case about that they were talking about in current events in school, for like history and social studies, about that was before the bench, and they must have been determining whether it fell within the parameters of the First Amendment rights of freedom of speech to burn the American flag. And in my little 7 or 8-year-old mind thought, that's just ridiculous, and I have to tell someone about it. So I decided, somehow I asked my mom what I could do about this, and she said, well, I don't know if I just heard her talking about writing editorials or what, but I decided I had to write an editorial to the local newspaper and tell someone about it because I was upset and everyone needed to know it. I told you I was a weird kid. So I did that. And then in 4th grade, I wrote my first poem. And I think I realized that because I was different, even though I didn't know or understand on the level that I have over the last years, several decades of my adult life, that my life was going to be different and I would be at different, not advantages, because you're at a disadvantage a lot of times when you're not included and you're struggling with all these areas of life, but be in a position of having not the opportunities and maybe not knowing what I would be able to do or not do, that I knew that as long as I had my voice and my thoughts and my brain and paper and pen, or, well, computer screens, digital, they couldn't take that from me. And I could always put out into the world what I was creating.
Mm-hmm.
And I always felt called to it. And obviously what I write now is not what I wrote when I was 8. I hope not, or dear God, we're in trouble. But I just knew I was wanted to write, and I knew I had a story, and I knew I had a message. And obviously it's grown as I've learned more, and more of the pages of my own story have been filled with the journey that I described with the 38 Triple D of what it was like to grow up with a disability and still have a life with a disability. Each phase in our lives and each chapter in our life brings, the disability hasn't changed, but what we do at 2, 5, 10, 17, 25, and 40 is very different. So while my actual disability hasn't changed, with the new season of my life brings different challenges related to the vision, because I'm having to do new things that I didn't do before, right? So I'm always having to pivot and adjust. So with that, and then being divorced, and then, grief and loss and parenting and all the things, it has always just given me stuff that added to my message and my story that I felt like I could share with others to help them along their way. I don't know everything, and I'm not saying I have all the solutions, but I can share what I've learned. So there you go.
So how do you use like your writing in your books and what message do you share with other people and give them hope?
Well, in the current series, that the ones that would be relevant to this one is my Now I See series, where I do talk about my life story, and then in the first book, and then I share a lot of knowledge in that as the series progresses about grief and loss and what it's been like to travel that journey, and a lot of what I talk about in that book, and then the other series that kind of is an accompany to it, because it's the more practical side of it, of finding grace through grief,
Mm-hmm.
is taught under the context of grief, yes, but it was 5 keys that I learned, even though I didn't know they were at the time as a little girl, because we have a choice in life. We can be a victim or a victor. And once you make the choice to be a victor or to overcome, while each adversity we each face may be different from one person to the next, like mine aren't yours and yours aren't mine,
Right.
but the idea of overcoming and the concept and what's required to overcome, no matter what it is you're overcoming, is the same. In fact, it requires the same skill sets. And so I talk about the 5 things that I learned at an early age because of the disability, even though I didn't know to call them that at the time, what I was able to apply to help me get through a life with a disability. And then I went, I have a different adversity this time. Well, then maybe those 5 work for this. And so even though I learned them for the disability, they've helped me in every stage of my life. And even though mine are different from the next person, it's universal to the idea of, you have this thing, you don't want to define you. And so you need to find a way to get through it or over it or around it, so you can apply it to just about any problem in life. And so that's kind of what I talk about in a lot of my books, in those 2 series especially. And it's kind of just what's helped me through all of mine. And if you're interested in it, I'd love to share them with you.
Sure.
I call it, like I said, finding grace through grief, because that's how I came up with it. But it really it boils down to finding your grounding in life, or if you're dealing with grief, then in grief, finding that grounding that's going to steady you when you're trying to get through this hard time, this struggle, this storm, this obstacle. Maybe that is having a foundation of knowing your purpose and your why, or what's going to motivate you, or maybe it's your family, maybe it's your faith, maybe it's your beliefs. Whatever that looks like for you, knowing what's true and knowing what's going to hold you steady in those hard times. And then the R is about choice, because even if you're like, oh, I don't want to make a choice, well, and not wanting to make a choice, you're making a choice. All life is a pattern of our choices strung together, and depending on what sets of choices we make, takes us down one direction, versus if we'd chosen a different set of choices, would have taken us down a different path.
Right.
And so I was raised with the belief set of obviously my faith, but that you don't quit, you don't stop, and you don't give up. And my parents thought as long as she gives it her best, then let's see how far she can go with it and do what she can do. And so I've always chosen to do my best, not to be defined by my circumstances, but to define it for myself and find my own way. There is no handbook, there is no manual, there's no roadmap, there's no secret instructions. Sometimes you have to create your own, you know?
Right, for sure.
And then the A is the idea of living in abundance. Now, that can be finances. I'm not a financial girl. I have a planner for that. Thank goodness. But mine is more of the idea of our mindset. There's a reason why we say mind over matter, and that if you put your mind to it, you can do anything. It's true. If you put your mind to it, you can do it. If you don't put your mind to it, you probably won't do it. And so, even though yes is about choices, and I don't want to be defined by my circumstances, and I can choose what I do with those circumstances, I almost think sometimes the trickier one is the mindset, because the mindset can stop you in your tracks just as easier if you chose not to do it, if not more so. And so many things fly into our heads that it's like we may not choose the thoughts that come into our heads, but if we're smart with our mindset and our mental space and keep it healthy and positive, even though sometimes that's not the easiest thing to do, and I'm not claiming that it is, but if we can find ways and different practices to help our mindset be healthy and positive, then we can stay true to having a good mindset that'll motivate us, that helps us stay true to what we want to define for our lives and our choices that we're grounded in. So that's the A. And a lot of times that can just be seeing the silver linings or finding the smallest things to be grateful for, other things like that. The C is for choosing care and clarity over chaos and confusion, which this is, I think, hard for a lot of people, because there's a lot of, I think, myths surrounding the idea of self-care. And I can tell you, confession time, in my younger years, or excuse me, I wasn't the best at self-care. I thought I didn't have time for it. And when I say that, I was not a young mom, but a new mom, because I had my kids a little bit later in life. But because, like I said, I got divorced and remarried. But when I had my daughter, I was 31 going on 32. And when I had my son, I was 34 going on 35. But I had the brilliant idea that when my daughter was 8 months old, I should go to grad school, and let's have our second kid while in grad school. And by the way, you're able and you're legally blind and you don't have readers and you're trying to do grad school and you're raising. Yeah, okay. One semester I was writing my thesis with a 3-year-old and a 4-month-old who was not sleeping through the night. I was like, oh my God, I'm going to die. But I live to tell. I survived. I graduated. But my point is, during that time period, I was either doing grad school work, 20 to 50 hours a week, nothing else. I was taking care of my kids. I was trying to spend time with my husband. I was cleaning house. And if I wasn't doing one, I was doing the other 3. And if I wasn't doing one of the, this vicious cycle of rotating, I was like, oh my gosh, I don't have time to do anything else, barely what I do now. And then when my husband died in 2017 and we moved, well, I moved back to Louisiana. My kids had never lived in Louisiana until we moved. But I was finding that you will not survive grief. I promise you, if you don't find time to take care of yourself. And you can't keep your head above water in grief and loss without self-care, because you will drown. And if you don't do it for yourself, your body will make you stop. I found that out the hard way. And so, you think you don't have time and you think it's selfish, but it's really the best thing you can do, obviously in a measured way where you're not being irresponsible and totally forgoing, adulting. Although sometimes we wish we could forgo adulting. That would be nice, wouldn't it? We could just run away and not adult, but that's not true. But the laundry and the dusting and the bills and the dishes, if you take 30 minutes for yourself, as much as we wish they would poof go away with some magic fairy dust or fairy godmother wand or clicking our ruby heels, they're not. go take a nap and you'll wake up refreshed and not be burned out and overrun and run down and useless to you and yourself. So self-care is key.
Yep.
Because when we do self-care, we're not all those things. So we can have the clearer mindset to focus, to keep our mindset in the right direction, healthy and positive, so that we can make the choices that we want and not be defined what we don't want to be defined by and what we're grounded in. And then the E is being equipped, like getting the resources we need, getting the tools that we need, especially when it comes to disabilities, the information, the knowledge, the resources, the organization. Maybe it's, the things you need in your toolkit, like accommodations or whatever it is, training or support groups, but you're equipping yourself to be ready to continue on the journey so that you can achieve what you want and not just be stuck in it because you don't know what to do because you don't have what you need to do it. And part of that equipping is the self-care that allows you to stay true to the mindset. It's all connected, in other words. So
Yeah.
I didn't know that's what it was at the time, but that's what I did as a kid. And people say, well, being equipped, I don't want to ask for help, but it's really not as bad as people think it is. It doesn't make you weak. It actually shows that you're strong because you're recognizing that if you want, it's just a matter of, we teach our kids in school, if you have a question, you raise your hand and you find out the information. That's it. You're just getting what you need so that you can go live the life you want.
Yeah, those are all great. Are they in one of your books?
Yeah, Finding Grace Through Grief. Yeah.
Okay.
And I talk about it in other ones, but
Sure.
that was the practical side because I knew that people who were going through grief would want like a more bite size, like, okay, how did you
Right.
actually get through the grief and loss without,
Yeah.
just dying literally. But and that's how I got through the disability, and that's what I used to get myself through a divorce and a crappy first marriage, and then knowing those first little bit when my husband was gone and looking at my life going, oh my gosh, what now? And then continuing to do so 7.5 years in. And my kids were 6 and 3 at the time when their dad passed away. Not the youngest in life, but pretty young. We were still in New Hampshire.
Mm-hmm.
It hasn't been easy, but I mean, we're still here. We're still trying. So,
yeah.
Anyway.
What is one thing you can share with my audience today? Just something they can do easy to start being more inclusive.
Be informed, get out there and educate yourself, and be willing to advocate for yourself. And make the choices that are going to allow you to travel your journey your way. No one can tell you how to do it. You know what's best for you or your family or whoever you're supporting or, helping through their own. If we're parents with disabled kids, no one knows our kid better than we do.
That's very true. I say that all the time. I saw you did.
They need. So no one can tell us how to do it, especially if they don't know what the heck they're talking about because they've never done it before.
For sure. I saw you did a TEDx talk. How was that?
That was good. I really wanted to do it. I was really glad to have it out there because that's basically what I talked about is walking people through that.
Sure.
And I hope it helps people. But that was an interesting journey in of itself.
Yeah, I've given 2 TEDx talks. My first one I gave 10 years ago, and then one again this year. So those are pretty fun for me. So
yeah, they are. They're good. It's a great platform. It's good. Kind of one fell swoop of having the most impact from one thing, hopefully.
Right, for sure. Is there anything you want to talk about we haven't talked about?
No, I really do believe that self-advocacy or advocacy is so important because people aren't mind readers, and people, unfortunately in our culture, like unless you have to deal with disability, and the same thing with grief and loss, people don't think about it because they don't have to, and they don't get it because they don't have to. So why would they?
Yeah.
So, they don't know what you need and they're not going to go look for it for you. There's a reason why, lack for a better word, if you want it done right, you better go do it your damn self because no one's going to do it for you.
That's for sure.
So, I like to say we get one life. Life is short. There's no guarantee. So choose well and live the life you want and choose it well so that you can live your best life and thrive.
Yeah, that's great.
Especially that needs to happen with disabilities because our options and opportunities in this world are so different than what most people realize.
Yeah, for sure. Ready for the last question?
Sure.
Do you like spam? Yes or no?
Oh, is that okay? Actual spam. I was thinking about
actual spam. Yeah.
Sorry, I was like I couldn't see because it was small.
Sorry. Yeah.
That's okay. No, I'm a ham girl. Sorry, I'm not.
That's
I don't
fun.
eat it.
Yeah, I live in Austin, Minnesota, where they make Spam and where the Spam Museum is located. So I've just been asking everybody
Yeah.
that I have on to see if they like it or not.
Nope.
Where is the best place everybody can connect with you?
I have a website called myheartfeltmeditations.com, and then all of my books are on Amazon right now.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you so much for being on.
Well, thanks for having me.
Yeah. To all of you listening, thank you for joining us on this episode of the Inclusive Dad Podcast. If you enjoyed today's conversation, please subscribe, rate, or review the show. Your feedback helps us connect with more champions of inclusion. Remember to share this podcast with friends and family who might benefit. If you want to support us in our mission, please click on the link in the show description. Together we can make the world more inclusive. Until next time, stay empowered and be a champion for inclusion.